Welcome to this e-lecture, which will be about hypothesis testing and when doing regression analysis. In regression analysis, we are also testing hypothesis, our hypothesis is that our null hypothesis is that the regression coefficient is equal to 0. So if there is no correlation between the dependent and the independent variable, the regression coefficient is equal to 0. There's no slope at all. So an example could be that our null hypothesis is that the regression coefficient for the government's share of health expenditures are equal to 0, and that implies that there is no linear association between the independent and the dependent variable in the population. So the government's share of health expenditures is not related to expected life expectancy at all, because in this example we will use life expectancy as the dependent variable, and the government's share of health expenditures is the independent variable. Whereas the alternative hypothesis is that the government's share of health expenditures, the regression coefficient for the independent variable, is different from 0. It actually has an effect on life expectancy. So in this case, the alternative hypothesis implies that there is a linear association between the independent variable, the government's share of health expenditures, and the dependent variable, life expectancy, in the population. And the population in our example are all countries in the world. So the regression coefficient in the population is different from 0. And if the risk of getting the sample regression coefficient, given that that the null hypothesis is correct, is lower than the chosen significance level, usually 5%, the null hypothesis implying that the regression coefficient is equal to 0 is rejected. So that means that if the risk that we are rejecting a true null hypothesis is lower than 5%, we can be 95% sure, or even sure, that the null hypothesis is not true. It's a false null hypothesis, and the regression coefficient is actually different from 0. Then we reject H0. So how do we do regression analysis in SPSS? Well, we go to analyze, we go to regression, we go to linear, and we put in life expectancy in the dependent variable, because that's our dependent variable, and we put in government share of total health expenditures in our independent variable, and we get these results. So this is the constant. This is the regression coefficient, and we are really testing, is this regression coefficient different from 0, which is the null hypothesis? And yes, it is definitely so, because our p-value is very much different, or very much lower than 5%. So H0 is rejected because the p-value is less than the significance level. We can be more than 95% sure. We can actually be 99.999 something, because there is a number down here somewhere, that H0 is not true, the regression coefficient is different from 0 in the population. So we can be pretty sure that this is in fact the case, that the government's share of health expenditure is actually there's for 1% increase in the government share of health expenditures, life expectancy increased by 0.2 years. We can be pretty sure of that. So we also do hypothesis testing when doing regression analysis. So that was the e-lecture on hypothesis testing and the regression analysis. Thank you so much.